Good evening and welcome into another edition of Crunch Time Nightly here on ASTV Productions. I am Michael Wags, Wagon Connect, alongside Joe Hamilton and thankfully Scott Tobin, because I almost forgot to send him the link to get in. I am such an idiot, and thankfully, Scott, you got the link to get in. Dude, I saw your message on the group chat and you're like, Are you guys ready for this? I'm like, yeah, I'm pumped. And then you're like, you got the link? I'm like, oh shit, I'm an idiot. I completely forgot about it. So I'm glad I got to you in time. Wow.
It's all good.
I completely forgot about it. But glad to have you guys here tonight. The interview with John Hewlett earlier today, we'll get to that in just a second, was amazing. Absolutely a blast. But how you guys been enjoying your day stuck inside with all the snow going on?
It's good. I went out and ran around for a little while ago. It's really, really cold out there.
I just stuck in the house watching the Blues, and kind of sad that they lost today. But you know what? Playing a hard-fought 7-game series, and hell, another Game 7 is a 1-goal game. Who would have thunk it, right? No, but seriously, don't worry, Blues fans. They're still in the regular season. But no, it was fun today. I had fun with that interview, and I had fun with the rest of my day. So, yeah, making the best of it.
Yeah, we certainly are, and we're going to be changing some things up here on Crunch Time. We've been kind of doing this for a good 6 months or so now. Hard to believe that we've been doing this nightly for 6 months, all thanks to the wonderful pandemic. But we're kind of looking at changing some things up. So bear with us over the next week as we do some testing on some different things. We're going to be throwing some commercials out at you guys, some segments, things like that. So definitely stick with us. And just want to shout out Caitlin Miller. Hi, how are you? Guy Bensing, the Hawaii Blues fan. What's going on, man? Glad to have you a part of this. And quickly to answer Caitlin's questions, are fans allowed in the stadium for Blues games? Yes, they certainly are. And the Cardinals are also going to be allowing fans in the stands as well. So we're starting to get back to some semblance of normalcy for that. It's a lot of fun, and we cannot wait for that. As Joe and I and Scott alluded to a little bit earlier, we had John Hewlett on our show earlier today. And real quickly, we want to play a clip of that so you guys can kind of get an idea of what we went through today talking to John Hewlett and really what you can expect listening to the interview. So here's a clip from today's interview with John Hewlett.
Talk a little bit about how weird last year was, John, being a PA announcer in an empty stadium. What was that experience like?
Well, it was different at the major league level, but we do a lot of games down at Busch for high school teams and college teams when there aren't very many people in the stadium. So, that didn't feel that weird to me. But for a professional game, yeah, it was strange. But we got used to it, and the players got used to it too, really. We had the fake crowd going, and that was fun. The guy who was running the fake crowd sat right next to me, and we'd be jacking it up, pulling it down, and trying to make it funny, trying to make it fun. Yeah, I mean, as far as driving to the stadium, there was no traffic, so that was great. And I pretty much just had to show up at game time, and then I was out of there when the last out was made. And it made the job. It made the job easier, but it took some of the excitement out of it.
And that was from our interview with John Hewlett earlier today. You can catch that on any of the spots you get your podcast from or on our Facebook page as well. Guys, that was another great interview with Mr. Hewlett, second time that he was on with us. I'm still just in awe that we got a chance to talk with him. What are your thoughts on the interview now that we're about, 7 hours past it?
The guy's just a pro, man. I mean, he came in cracking jokes, talking about his Jennifer Aniston shirt to start the show. So if you want to see the interview, you can watch him talk about how he was giving drinks to his Jennifer Aniston T-shirt that he got for his birthday. And, and then we got into serious stuff. We talked sports and music, but the guy's just a pro and, couldn't be a more humble guy either. I mean, he's gracious and appreciates the fact that we had him on our show, which is pretty weird because we're all still in awe that he was willing to come on our show, especially twice.
Well, I mean, you can't be that shocked, Scott. I mean, we got one regular. Maybe we have another one in Hewlett, man. We never know.
No, I know that. I'm just saying, a guy that's a legend like John Hewlett is, and in a couple of different areas, not only in, being a PA announcer at Busch Stadium, but, the guy's a rock legend on, he's been on one of the biggest classic rock stations, not only in St. Louis, but in the country for, 35 years, 40 years, and for him to be willing to come on and spend a couple of hours with us twice now is just still pretty cool to me.
I am 100% in agreement with that. The fact that he's excited about it. And we talked about it on the interview today about, him apologizing for missing out the last time we tried setting stuff up. That struck me as something that was like, wow, this is a guy that is huge in St. Louis on the radio. He's with the Cardinals. He's got all this stuff up here. And yet he, A, remembers when we tried to hook up with him last time, and B, still was like apologetic about the fact that he was unable to join us because of a scheduling conflict. That right there, to your point, Scott, shows the professionalism and just what a great person he is. And once again, puts me in awe that he would be apologizing to us when we're a Facebook, YouTube, internet radio show with a radio show on the side. And yet he's the one apologizing to us.
Yeah, that made me laugh because he emailed me at like 7 o'clock this morning and told me that. He's like, yeah, I'm all set up. I've got you guys on my phone. I've got you on my calendar. I won't miss it this time. I apologize for last time. And I'm like, man, you need to, and that's like the fourth time he's apologized for missing that one show. It's like, dude, we understand you're a little bit busy, so it's not an issue. But yeah, just a great guy, fun interview. Make sure you check the whole thing out because he is amazing.
That he is. And Lester, I don't think Joe still is me. He never wanted to assume my debt. So because he did not want to take on my debt, I decided to take my name back. I am still Wags. Joe is not.
I still can't get over, that night because Scott just sat there in awe. Like, really, Joe, you just said that? Like, really? And I was like, damn, I hope Wags isn't mad. I hope the real Wags isn't mad. But you handled it all in stride, man. I like it.
Well, and I'll put it out there. If anybody does want to become me, all you have to do is assume my debt. If you are willing to do that, you can have the moniker and the name. I'll come up with something completely different. And I'm sure the same goes for you guys. If you have any debts and anybody wants to assume, you will gladly give them your name.
I'm shocked I haven't said I'm Scott yet, to be honest with you.
It's because you don't remember my name half the time. We were talking earlier today, and you were like, what about you? And you just looked at me like you had no idea what my name was.
Yeah, I got. You know what? I do have to kind of fix that. Here you go. And now, Joe, now you should not forget Scott's name because it is right on the screen. Make sure you know who he is.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. But yeah, it's.
What are you shaking your head for, man? It's okay.
Because, it's just hilarious. I can bust out right now. I'm trying to keep myself from going absolutely crazy.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Let's just run down a couple of the big news notes in the world of sports right now before we get into some of our new stuff. Want to hit on a couple of big stories. Ex-NFL wide receiver Vincent Jackson was found dead today at 38 in a hotel room. Played for both the Chargers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Kind of a sudden passing for still a relatively young guy. Just want to get your guys' quick thoughts on Jackson and what he went through in the NFL and the untimely timing of his death, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, way too young, 38 years old. He was a 3-time Pro Bowler. He was a pretty damn good receiver. It's going to be interesting to see what comes out in the next couple of days because I know they were saying the police were still conducting an investigation into what caused his death. So it'll be interesting to see what we learn in the next few days because just way too young to go.
Yeah, way too young. I didn't really get to watch him on the field. He was a great wide receiver. I just didn't get to see him, and I'm kind of sad I didn't. Now I may have to, after this show, go on YouTube and watch some of his stuff because, wow. Anyone at 38 years old, isn't that just the beginning of life? I mean, not necessarily the beginning, but you guys know where I'm going with that, right?
Yeah, it's definitely not anywhere being close to being old.
Yeah, definitely too early for anybody to go that young.
Yeah, and just kind of reading through some of the reports, an ESPN article that came out on it. He was a guy that was very active with military parents. He's a son of military parents, founded the Jackson in Action 83 Foundation, became an honorary sheriff's deputy in his town that he was living in. So definitely a very sad thing. He won a couple of fantasy football championships for myself. So that's neither here nor there, but just once again, another one of those great players that is going to be missed. Other news, Jalen Johnson from Duke, freshman, going to leave early, start prepping for the NBA draft. I'm a little surprised that we haven't seen a little bit more of this, especially from teams in the country that are possibly going to miss the tournament. Duke is right there on the edge of possibly missing the tournament. Do you think we're going to see, as these conference championships start to kind of get going here, teams that are either bounced early or maybe not even make the tournament? Do you think you might see some of these star players not play in the tournaments and kind of declare for the NBA draft?
Well, let me ask you this question. If you're at Duke and your team's not good enough to make the NCAA tournament, should you be prepping for the NBA draft as a freshman? Shouldn't you be, I don't know, prepping for your sophomore year to try to get better? Because Coach K is not used to that, man. I don't know if you've seen some of his press conferences this year, but poor guy looks like he's about to have a nervous breakdown.
Yeah, he basically called out a student reporter a couple of weeks ago for quitting on the team, and then he had to go out and apologize as well. Yeah, Jalen Johnson's a projected lottery pick, so I don't think it's more so the fact that Duke isn't playing well, but it doesn't help your chances if you can't go out there and help your team be better. And I think that's kind of the point you're driving home there is Duke is a perennial tournament team. If you are a projected lottery pick and you're playing for Duke, and even in a pandemic-shortened season with all these trials and tribulations, if you're not able to put your team in a position to potentially make the NCAA tournament, are you really supposed to be someone that's going to drop out and prep for the NBA draft? Do you really think you're the next Kevin Garnett or Kobe Bryant that should have came out of high school to go right to the NBA? And that's the thing that I just don't think you should be thinking at if you can't help your team win.
No, I agree. Also, the fact is, and I'm sorry to jump on you, Scott, but the fact is, as a freshman, you shouldn't think about, unless you think you're that good, is Jalen Johnson this good to where he could go to the NBA right now and be an effective player? The thing is, you're a freshman. Not many freshmen in college are good enough for the NBA right out of their freshman year. I'm sorry.
I mean, there are a few, but here's a question for you, Wags. Do you think major colleges start looking at the one-and-doners all of a sudden? Is it starting to catch up with them? Because look at the rankings. The teams that do this year in and year out, the Dukes, the Kentuckys, the Kansases, they're all down. They're barely in the top 25, if at all. Is all these years of just running these high-profile kids, these one-and-doners through their program and out and not really building anything, is it finally starting to catch up with them?
Oh, I think so. It's definitely a mindset that was eventually going to run out, especially now that you've got these other schools that are building programs and they're building them with guys that could be considered one and dones. And yet now those guys are sticking around for a couple of years as well to potentially win a championship in college basketball. The other point for Johnson is the fact that he just hasn't played much in the last couple of years. Just reading this ESPN article, he hasn't played a complete season since his junior year of high school. He left the IMG Academy without playing a game his senior year and then only played 9 games in Wisconsin before moving on to Duke. So that's another part of it as well. These kids that are one and done, they think they don't have to play. They think their talent alone is going to get them wherever they need to go. And I think that you're starting to see that. And you're also starting to see these schools that have the one and dones, they're starting to get in trouble. The Kansases, the Kentuckys, those teams are starting to get in trouble because of everything that's going on with the NCAA and those investigations into Adidas and things like that. And that's another piece that's hurting it as well. It makes you sit back and think, with these one and dones, was it really because they were that good of players, or were there other pieces at work that got them to these schools and then they just got put into a good system and they shined in that system?
Yeah, and that's a good point, because we see a lot of these kids. I mean, a good amount of them make it to the NBA and they have good careers, but we also see a good amount get there and they flame out and they're never what everybody thought they were because they weren't ready. Whether it's maturity wise, their game wise, they just haven't advanced their skills past a certain level to where they should be going to the NBA yet. So, there's a lot of things that kids and families and even programs need to look at before they say, oh yeah, you had a great freshman year. Let's go to the NBA and make millions of dollars, which I know in some cases the kids do it because they think they have to help their families. But, for long term, if they really want to support their families, they need to look at it the other way in some instances too and say, if I'm not really ready, I might be able to support you for a couple of years, but I'm not going to make the kind of money that's going to support us for generations. So that it's kind of a double-edged sword in a lot of ways in how these one-and-doners work.
Yeah, it really is. And you're hoping that the legislation that goes into being able to provide college athletes with the potential means to make money maybe changes the one and done formula to where if they can make a little bit on their names in college, they stick around for a couple of years, build up a little bit of money based on their likeness, build their skills, then get into the NBA or the NFL or what have you, and then be able to make those big dollars as well. That's another piece to that double-edged sword. Now it's a triple-edged sword because you've got that involved as well. So lots of very interesting conversations with that. And hopefully in the near future, we can get a guy like a Jim Sturk or a Conzo Martin or Travis Ford on to talk a little bit about that and that mindset as well, because both Martin and Ford are building programs versus some of these one-and-dones that are really just trying to get butts in the seat, essentially. All right, well, that's kind of where we're at on the rundown. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to start hitting on our top three things. And first up is going to be Scott, and we're going to be talking a little bit about Major League Baseball and the Cardinals situation. So make sure you come back here on Crunch Time for more sports talk. And back here on Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions, Wags, Joe, and Scott. We're going to start hitting our three big things, and Scott's going to lead us off.
So our first big thing, and I guess it should be because this is a big week for baseball fans like me, spring training starts on Wednesday. Most of the boys are down there. Pitchers and catchers report on Wednesday. They have their first workouts on Thursday. And I had an interesting conversation, and we've had this conversation on the show. The Cardinals got Nolan Arenado. They brought Yachty back. They brought Waino back. But are they still missing a piece? Do they still need to go get another starting pitcher? And we've kind of debated that on the show. This morning I saw Mike Shannon, voice of the Cardinals for 50 years now, and they asked him that very question, how ready are you for spring training? How ready are the Cardinals to compete? And he's basically said Nolan Arenado was great, but I really think we need to add another pitching piece, another starter. So that really made me think about it, boys. We've talked about this for a long time. There's a couple of starters still sitting out there. Is it time for the Cardinals to go back and make that call and see if they can pull something off with Jake Odorizzi?
I think it's almost a must. You're starting to you've talked a lot, and the Cardinals have talked a lot about the pitching depth that they have. And they do have a lot of pitching depth, but they also have a lot of question marks as well. You're not entirely sure what you're going to get out of an Alex Reyes in the rotation. You don't know what you're going to get with a Daniel Ponce de Leon or anything like that. And you have a kind of a proven commodity in a Jake Odorizzi. I would be fine with slotting him in as like a fourth starter. And I would feel comfortable with that. And I don't even know if he is a fourth starter. He may be a guy that could fill in that 2 or 3 role as well. But, looking at it, you don't know what Miles Michaelis is going to bring this year coming off of injury as well. So really, there's only 2 legit constants in your rotation right now. And that's Jack Flaherty and that's Adam Wainwright. And even Adam Wainwright could be labeled a question mark because do you really think he's going to repeat what he did last year? I think he can, but the question is still there. So for me, it's a must that you have to go out there and get more of a proven commodity to put in that rotation so you have 3 guys that you can trust while only having to worry about 2 rotation spots.
You basically echoed my sentiment there, Wags, because sentiment. Okay, that's a word I continuously get wrong. I get it. You echoed my sentiment there. Yeah, look, there are a lot of questions. I talk about the depth. You have a lot of questions, though. But I'm going to name some other guys that you didn't name that Scott names a lot. And one is Miles Michaelis. You don't know what you're going to get out of him coming up.
Already said him, but okay.
Okay, but my second guy has to be KK. What are you going to get from KK in this rotation? Scott said many times he doesn't like KK in this rotation, doesn't think KK can do anything. Frankly, you know what? A year under his belt, and granted, it was a crap year of 60 games. That's what I mean. The season in terms of 60 games and how it was all played out, Wags. That's what I meant. But the fact is, you're gonna have KK rolled out there. You're gonna have you outside of Wainwright and Flaherty. You don't have any for sure guys that you can throw out there and trust. I mean, how many of these guys? Yes, you have a lot of depth, but how many of these guys can you trust at this point? You know, Daniel Ponce de Leon has earned a little bit of that, but outside of that, I haven't seen many other guys, at least a lot, that I can just say, hey, throw them out there. They're going to be fine. So I agree with you. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Joe. I didn't mean to cut you off. Finish your statement there.
Well, the thing is, you need proven commodities. You can't – everyone wants to say Carlos Martinez. He pitched well in the Dominican League. I understand that, Wags. You're looking at me like I'm nuts. I get it.
I'm pretty sure almost everybody in St. Louis, outside of actual baseball fans, are saying Carlos Martinez shouldn't be a Cardinal. So the fact that people are continuing to say Carlos Martinez is not.
Hey, I'm naming to one person on this show, and that's Scott. Carlos Martinez, he thinks will be on this in this pitching rotation. You're number 5, and okay, why? What makes you think? Yeah,
because of those guys that you just named, KK, Miles Michaelis, Adam Wainwright, Daniel Ponce de Leon. You know who is the best stuff of those guys? Carlos Martinez. Carlos Martinez has the best stuff of any of those 4 guys, and he may have as good as stuff, and I said this last year. When healthy, I think he has better stuff than Jack Flaherty. I honestly do. There's a reason why he was nicknamed Little Pedro coming up and, has been referenced to Pedro Martinez so many times. Carlos is a guy when he's healthy, every time he goes out there, he's capable of throwing a no-hitter. And the Cardinals need that. They need Carlos Martinez. They don't need Carlos Martinez to come in camp and be their 5th starter. They need Carlos Martinez to come in and be that number 2 guy that goes out there and gives you six and a 2/3 innings every time he pitches. And, that's my argument for Odorizzi, too, because when you look at these other guys, I mean, and you guys have talked about this, we don't know what Miles Michaelis is going to be coming off his Tommy John. It may take him half the season to totally get back in stride. KK, we didn't see enough of KK last year to really know what he is. I mean, he had a couple of good appearances, and then he had a couple of really bad ones. He didn't look good in the postseason when he pitched. And if you go back and look at his numbers, his strikeout rate was only like 12%. That's not sustainable for success for a starting pitcher in Major League Baseball. I mean, if you're only striking out 12% of the hitters, you're going to get hit a lot. And we've all seen what happens with Japanese Oriental pitchers in the major leagues once hitters get a look at them for an extended amount of time and have some video. A lot of times those numbers go down. So I think you need Carlos in that rotation, and I think you need a guy who, like Odorizzi, has that fastball that can get 94, 95. Because if you don't have those 2 guys in your rotation, think about this. And we all know that fastballs are the thing in baseball: velocity, spin rate. So do you want to go into your season with a rotation where Flaherty's throwing 94, 95, but then you got Waino who's throwing, 89, 90, which is fine with his curveball and his cutter. But then your next guy is KK who's throwing 80, 84. And then, when does Miles Michaelis' velocity come back? Is he starting the season throwing 88, 89? I mean, do you really want to go with 3 or 4 guys in the middle of your rotation throwing in the 80s when everybody else in the league's throwing mid-90s? So they need Carlos in that rotation, and they need either an Odorizzi or they need Alex Reyes or Ponce to step up big time. But I would really like Odorizzi just because he has a history of eating innings.
I'm going to name one guy, Scott, and I kind of want your thoughts on maybe he could be a big-time impact. He was at some point last year, and that's Johan Oviedo. We saw what this guy could do last year. He has that nasty stuff. What do you think this guy could do this year?
I like Oviedo. I like what he has. But here's the thing, and we talk about this all the time, too. You're talking about a kid who jumped a bunch of levels last year, he basically went from A-ball to, oh crap, we need to use him. Let's throw him out there. So what happens to him this year if you throw him out there and hitters get more video on him and he hasn't really established his secondary pitches yet? Do teams light him up because he's not really matured yet? I mean, I think he's going to. I think he's going to be a really talented pitcher. But you got to remember that he's really young and you're throwing him into a pretty tough situation if you try to count on him for 162 games. So, I think the best thing for Johan Oviedo, honestly, would be to be in Springfield probably and pitch ideally at least half of the season down there, get a lot of innings, see some double-A hitters. And then if you get to the All-Star break, when you get into July and August, get him up here and have him here for the stretch run where you can put him in the bullpen and have him be that one-inning force that we've seen in Alex Reyes or Carlos Martinez, some of those guys be when they first really made their impacts in the major leagues.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to what Alex Reyes puts out there this year. And I don't think he's a guy that needs to be in that second, third, fourth. I think he deserves to be at least the fifth starter to start the season to see what he's got, because he has done a lot of maturing and he's had a lot of growth the last couple of years. I mean, last year we were wondering, is this it for Alex Reyes? Is he going to be able to be mature and go out there and bounce back from maybe a bad outing or come into a tight spot and be able to do it? And he really did last year. He showed a lot of growth last year, and I really think he deserves a chance at that fifth spot to really show what he can do. And going back to Carlos, I'm the same boat as you, Scott. I think he needs to be in the rotation. Yes, he's a head case. Yes, he does some things that make you go, really? What? And yes, he has some games where you go, does this guy even know how to pitch? But then you get those moments where it's just like, where's this guy been the entire career? He has those moments. And I'd like to think that finally he's starting to see that. He pitched down in the Caribbean World Series. Like you said, he was the MVP. He's got Yadier Molina behind the plate, a guy that has worked wonders with a lot of young pitchers. Yes, he's lost some of his friends on this team due to death, unfortunately, and things like that. But do you think he finally matures this year and sees what is in front of him? Or is it just another case of you just got to hope and pray that each time he goes out there isn't the time that he decides to go and blow up?
I think this is the year that he does mature. During Yadi's press conference, they asked him what he saw from Carlos in the Dominican, in the Winter Ball League. And, that was the first thing Yadi said was, he seems different. He seems more mature. And, it sounds crazy to be talking about a guy that's been in the major leagues for 8 years and be like, oh yeah, now he's finally maturing. But, like you said, Wags, Carlos went through a lot of traumatic things early in his career, losing Oscar Taveras and dealing with all of those things in the public eye. And then he had a friend that had cancer, and he's done a lot of charity work. People bash Carlos because of his hair and because of his head, but Carlos is a good guy. Carlos does a lot of amazing things behind the scenes for charities that people don't really give him the credit that he deserves for them. I think this is the year that he really does step up, if for no other reason. He's not a young kid anymore. He's still 20. Yeah, he's still 28, going to be 29, but he's playing for a contract. This is his last guaranteed contract year with the Cardinals. The Cardinals do have options for the next 2 years. So if you pitch well, the Cardinals maybe pick up that option and you make $12 or $13 million each of the next 2 years. If he struggles, that guarantee goes away, and maybe his career options go away because maybe nobody's willing to give him much of anything if he can't step up and really prove something this year.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting season for sure. And we'll be talking a lot more about the Cardinals as the weeks go on, especially with spring training opening up on Wednesday. But coming up, we're going to have Joe's big thing. Going to move into the NBA, which is a territory we don't necessarily get into a whole lot of. So make sure you come back for more of that on Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. All righty, back here on Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. And can I just say before we get to Joe's big moment that I'm starting to feel a little bit more professional with this now because we've got some commercials to run and we're segmenting out the show. Does anybody else feel professional now?
It feels great, dude. I've been wanting this for a long time, and hopefully as we go down the road, maybe those are filled with some of our commercials. You know what I mean? I'd like that. I think you guys would too. I'm just gonna get into this because I don't understand this at all. How is it that the NBA is having an All-Star game when no league anywhere had an All-Star game? How is this even possible? And my other question is, are they going to make this more political? Are they going to make this more is that the main reason for this? But go ahead, guys. I want you guys to debate this because I don't understand why one league's doing something the rest of the leagues aren't. Go ahead.
I mean, first off, I kind of want to hear what your thoughts are on it. I mean, what have you found out about the NBA All-Star Game? What's going on with it? What's about it? Is it the same sort of weekend? It's the same sort of weekend. None of the players are going to be, at parties or anything, which all the players are going to go down in private jets. And I'm guessing a group will go together. I haven't seen much on that, but either going to go down in private jets or cars that the NBA provides. The NBA will provide this, which is a good thing, but I just don't understand why it's even happening at this point, because with everything, I kind of get it from the NBA perspective because they're probably wanting to shine a light on what's going on right now. And they're trying to do what other leagues aren't doing, and I don't understand why. Scott, I want to go to you first on this because when I saw the NBA is actually going through with an All-Star game, it kind of baffled me. What'd you think?
I'll tell you this, Joe. Of all the pro sports, All-Star games, All-Star weekends, do you know which league is the most televised, most watched, and most lucrative for the league?
The NBA.
So there you go. You just answered your own question right there, because the TV ratings for the skills competitions, the 3-point shoot, the dunk contest, all of that stuff the night before, they bring in massive ratings. Usually the ratings for that stuff is higher than the game itself. So, that brings in huge stuff. The game also brings in big revenue makers for commercials and that kind of stuff. And they get to good ratings for the game. Plus, there is a small fan fest usually, and the players aren't going to be involved too much, but there's going to be things going on in the city all around that's going to bring in people to spend money on merchandise for the league. It's one of the big money makers for the NBA. It's one of the few, like I said, pro sports all-star events that really, really gets people excited. And so that's why the NBA is doing it, because they feel like they've got this COVID thing not beat, but they feel like they're doing a good enough job that they can pull this off.
And then you also look at it, and it's such a self-contained event as well. The NBA is having pretty much as close to a normal regular season as possible, 82-game schedule, all of that. So it makes sense. Whereas you look at the NHL, and you can make the argument that, yes, the NHL could have a self-contained all-star game as well, but they're only having a 56-game season. So if they were having a longer normal-like season, I could see the NHL possibly doing this as well. But those two leagues are so self-contained. You can do this with limited players. You can do it with limited fans, and yet you would still get, in the NBA's case at least, great ratings. I mean, look at the events that are held on, normally the Saturday night before the game. It's the 3-point contest, it's the slam dunk contest, and it's a couple of other things where, well, let me think about this. Usually either they're on the court by themselves, or they're definitely more than 6 feet apart. So there's social distancing like nobody else in that instance. And you could say the same thing for the NHL skills competition for the most part as well. It's usually one guy on the ice or 6 feet apart. So those two events could technically go on. And what the NBA is doing is they're doing this all in one day. So you may get something a little different to where everything happens in the morning when it comes to the contest, and then you have the game at night. It shortens the amount of time that players have to go out to the parties, like you said, that they aren't going to be doing. They can bring a limited number of guests, but they have to be confined to the hotel or transport to the event. So the NBA feels like they've got a handle on this. It seems like they do for the most part. And I think that and the fact that they're playing close to a normal schedule kind of allows them to have a little bit of a celebration in the middle of the season because, like Scott said, they haven't beaten this, but they've done a pretty damn good job of keeping it under control. Why not celebrate the players that are playing well and having good seasons and give the fans something to look forward to in another couple of months that have gone the same way as 2020 in a sense?
I totally get where you're coming from, but my second thing is I wonder how protesty this is going to be. And you know where I'm going with this, Wags. I'm sorry to even bring this up, but the NBA, I mean, you saw it in the bubble last year that all of them, were wearing different jerseys. They had the Black Lives Matter on the court. How much of this do you think is going to be, publicized with that in mind? Go ahead, guys. That's the main reason I wanted to talk about this.
I don't think it's going to be protesty. I mean, guys are going to do what they want to do. I'm sure there'll be some Black Lives Matter stuff around the court in some aspect, but I don't think there's going to be the tension kind of stuff that we saw last year. I think a lot of that is eased, and I think some people were highly motivated last year to oppose that kind of stuff because of the racial tension we saw going on all over the country, which that's kind of relaxed a little bit. So I don't think there'll be the protest and the tension around that kind of stuff this year. So I think that'll be better. And again, going back to just All-Star Weekend in the NBA, of all the major sports, I mean, you don't really talk about, oh man, did you see this in the All-Star game in baseball or the hockey All-Star game? But the NBA All-Star Weekend, 3 months from now, you might still be going, oh man, did you see that dunk? Did you see those crazy threes he was throwing up? I mean, the NBA is like the only sport where All-Star Weekend matters, that people are still talking about it months later.
It really is. And to your question about, the political side of it, yeah, I think last year you're in the midst of everything that was going on, with George Floyd and everything that had happened last year. And I think now, while things haven't eased, I think they still want to keep the conversation going because it's an important conversation. I really think it's something that you can't let go. You can't just say, oh, well, a certain person's not in office anymore. That means everything's better.
Right.
Like, you still need to have these conversations. They still have things on the floor, the Black Lives Matter and all that still on the courts throughout the season. So it's not like it would be anything different. It wouldn't be like it's out of the ordinary for them to do something like that. But I think to Scott's point, it's not going to be like it's in your face, even though I think it probably should be. It's not going to be in your face because we're not feeling like we're going against the crowd at this point. If that makes any sense. I think they also are going to take a look at it and what happened down in Dallas with, Cuban wanting to not run the Star Spangled Banner before, the games. I think that might actually pull things back a little bit as well. The NBA is a money-driven league. No question about that. Yes, they support their players and their thoughts and their rights and their protests. But at the end of the day, to Scott's point earlier, this is a money-making event. So I don't think they're, as much as they say they're supporting the players, I don't think they're going to let something like that, kind of perpetrate the entire weekend again. As much as some of us may disagree with that, I just think that that's going to be the case. So I think you'll see it. I think more than likely you're still going to see, players possibly being able to wear, the names of people's lives that were lost. I think you're obviously still going to have Black Lives Matter on the court. You're going to have other things, social justice movement things going on. But I think it'll definitely be a little bit muted this year when the All-Star game takes place.
Okay. That's the main thing I wanted to ask. Thanks, guys. But go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, and that was kind of my point too. I mean, the stuff's still going to be there, but there's not just the tension between the two sides. The Black Lives Matter and the people that are offended by it. There's not that tension because we don't have the riots in the streets, thankfully, this year that we had during last year. There's just not that overall tension. Like everything's right at a boiling point. So I think, like to Wags' point, I think we're still going to see all of the Black Lives Matter stuff. I think players are still going to be able to wear stuff on T-shirts and stuff like that, which I'm absolutely fine with. But I think it's just going to be a lot more relaxed atmosphere than what we dealt with last year. At least that's my hope.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, it's a conversation that was interesting to have because it is. You sit back and go, well, I mean, if leagues are worried about COVID and all that kind of stuff, why are you having a game that doesn't count or doesn't matter or anything like that? But to Scott's point, it's a moneymaker. It's one of the most highly publicized and highly watched all-star games out there. And it's also a self-contained kind of thing. Major League Baseball, it's harder to have an all-star game that's as contained as an NBA all-star game. The Pro Bowl is another one of those that is so hard to contain, and it's definitely a proximity thing as well. So I get why the NBA is doing it. I get why other leagues aren't. And as far as the NHL, they could have, but it is a shortened season, so it makes sense why they wouldn't. But it's definitely something that people probably didn't think about, and it's good to kind of get that out into the open and talk about it a little bit. So that's Joe's big moment. We're going to come back in just a minute with my big moment, and we'll have that next after this message from Tovey, which is a great hockey stick that is now coming out. So make sure you guys watch this and come back for crunch time here in just a moment. And back here on Crunch Time on ASTV Productions. And I tell you what, after watching that Blues game today, I'm pretty sure most of those guys on the team could have used a stick like that and actually maybe have tried to use it. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, the Blues had Game 7 against the Arizona Coyotes today, an early matinee for President's Day. And unfortunately, they fell 1-0 on a goal by Clayton Keller, St. Louis native. It was a rough one, boys. This was a game that was ripe for the taking for the St. Louis Blues. But when you only muster 4 shots in the third period, when you're down 1 goal, that's a little concerning. And it's mainly concerning because this team has started to get bit by the injury bug. I mean, just running down the list of guys that this team is missing, it's amazing. Tyler Bozak goes down with the Mark Stone hit. Robert Thomas breaks his thumb. Vladimir Tarasenko is still out. Marco Scandella is still day-to-day. Sammy Blais out day-to-day. Jaden Schwartz went down a couple of days ago with an upper body injury. And then even today, Torrey Krug leaves with a lower body injury. And that's kind of the impetus of my big moment is, are these injuries going to start catching up with the Blues? And if that's the case, are they going to have to turn to the trade market to fill some of these gaps? Because right now they're struggling. They're up against the cap. Tarasenko's still a couple of weeks away at best. I don't know where this team goes. I mean, looking at the guys that could fill some spots, obviously we've seen guys like Jacob De La Rose, Mackenzie McEachern, Austin Poganski had a really good game today. I believe. I think the 2 games he's been in, he's been great. But then you also have guys like Jake Wallman and Nico Mikkola, who Mikkola's been out the last couple of games for some reason. I don't know. But with the potential of Torrey Krug being out now as well, does that give a guy like Mikkola a chance to step up? And do you see this team going to the trade market to make any moves, or are they just going to have to weather the storm?
They're up against the cap, and I don't know how you would make that work in terms of a trade. You'd almost have to, and I'm kind of taking what you said earlier, and it makes sense, but you almost have to look at dumping salary. You almost have to look at dumping done. You almost have to look at, because if Tarasenko comes back, how does he fit cap-wise? He doesn't right now. So you're going to have to make those decisions anyway if he does come back in a couple weeks. But, Wags, I think this team is very deep. I like the way Mikko Mikkola is playing. I do like Mackenzie McEachern. That fourth line had a dandy of a game today. I mean, that fourth line was forechecking like hell. And you could say that was probably the best line on the ice today for the Blues. So, yeah, I mean, McEachern makes this team better on the fourth line. You also have Mikkola and on defense. But the one thing that I wanted to talk about from today's game had to be the one goal that was let up. Now, you saw the goal. It was Binnington. It hit off of his glove, off the I guess, the heel of his glove, and it bounced in. And the Blues had a 5-on-3 in this game, and they didn't capitalize on it. That turned out to be pretty huge, along with that goal. But go ahead, Scott. What do you think?
I think it's a team that's just really, really beat up right now.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about it. They're just beat up and trying to survive. And, you know, it's tough when you're playing the same team 7 games in a row. And then when you have guys going down every night, that makes it even tougher. And you're talking about the team's depth and guys you can pull from. You know, another guy that got hurt and is done for the year is Scott Marinovich, which everybody kept talking about. He may be up here at some point, and everybody couldn't wait to see him. Well, that's not going to happen this year now either. You know, so, I mean, they're definitely got some issues that they're going to have to try to work through. And I don't see them doing a whole lot at the trade deadline. Do you guys really think Vladdy's going to be able to come back and play and be a force when he does come back?
Well, and here's my issue with that, though. Vladimir Tarasenko has had 3 surgeries or 2 surgeries on the same shoulder. When you have multiple surgeries on the same shoulder, that shoulder, which he gets a lot of his weight from with his shot, you're not going to be the same guy. So people wanting Vladimir Tarasenko back, I need to caution you. He's not going to be the same guy anymore. I'm so tired of hearing people be positive, be positive. I am. But at the same time, you have to be real about it. You have to be realistic. So people wanting Tarasenko back, you're not going to get the same guy.
I'm going to burst your bubble because I'm going to go 100% against that. And I think he's actually going to be as good as he was when he went out and got injured. I mean, the fact that you look at how fast the shot comes off his stick, I believe it was something in the range of like 0.04 seconds from the puck hitting the stick to being off of it again. Even if he loses a couple of tenths of a second, that's still faster than a lot of guys in the league. And I think he's still a very deadly forward. Yeah, you talk about having multiple surgeries on the same shoulder. And yes, there is going to be some diminishing of his skill. But they found what was wrong on this last surgery. And I think that was the thing that was missing, obviously, the last couple of surgeries, is that they couldn't find the root problem. Well, now it feels like they found that root problem, and he's recovering as fast as he possibly can. I mean, he's back out on the ice skating with the team now. He was out taking pucks a couple of days ago before the team left for Arizona. And it's also Vladimir Tarasenko. I mean, you hear all the time about the work ethic of Russian players not being all that great. I can tell you right now, Vladimir Tarasenko does not fit that mold. This guy is a tank. This guy wants to win. This guy wants to prove that he's the best. And this guy does not want to let the city of St. Louis down. So put all of that together, and yes, there might be some diminishing of his skill, but I guarantee you that he is not going to let that stop him from being a damn good forward going forward.
No, and, you know, you talk about jumping to another sport, but you talk about a guy having multiple injuries to your shoulder. You can kind of compare him to what Scott Rowland went through in St. Louis. You know, it zapped some of Rowland's power, but he was still a really productive player at the plate and defensively. I mean, was he the exact same player that he was? No, but he was still an above-average Gold Glove all-star type player, even after he had multiple surgeries on that same shoulder. So I think you can look at that, and again, like I said, it's 2 different sports, but I think that has to be something that you look at and go, okay, you know, there's at least something that we can say, okay, we've seen an athlete in St. Louis have this happen. It worked out okay, so there's a positive to think that Vladdy will be able to come back and at least be a decent percentage of what he was before, because he's not going to be the exact same guy. But if you can get 80% or 85% of what Vladimir Tarasenko was before, I think you're going to be pretty happy.
And I'm gonna burst another bubble and kind of like almost contradict myself in a sense, but I don't believe Vladimir Tarasenko was ever going to be an elite forward. I think the Blues, and we've actually talked about this a little bit on Blue Notes Pod, about the fact that Vladimir Tarasenko was just the best player on the Blues team, and a lot of people built him up to be this elite player. And I don't think that was ever going to be the case. With that being said, his play overall has evolved so much over the last couple of years. He's become a great two-way forward. He's a guy that's really started to focus in on defense. Hell, he's been out on the penalty kill at times as well. So that's the thing people have to get past as well, that I don't think Tarasenko was ever going to be one of the super elites. He was never going to be Ovechkin. He was never going to be Crosby. He was never going to be Fedorov or any of those kind of guys. But he's going to be a damn good two-way forward that may end up only playing on the second line. But as I've talked in the past, that this team does not rely on a top line or a top two lines. They roll four lines. And when you have skill on all four of those lines, that's what's going to win you championships, and that's what's going to make you deadly. And I think that's what Vladimir Tarasenko does for this team.
Yep. Yeah, he totally does. Wags, I know it wasn't on your to-do list in terms of, you want to talk about the injuries, but the two instances today, you had the 5-on-3, plus you had the goal go off the glove of Jordan Binnington. Was that the turning point of the game? Which of those two was a turning point? Because I know that 5-on-3 was for me.
Well, I mean, the turning point would have had to have been when the goal was scored by Arizona, because that's ended up being the difference.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the Blues had a real chance. Granted, it was 30 seconds, but 30 seconds is enough time to get a play off and maybe score a goal, right?
I mean, if your power play is good this year and it doesn't convert, then yeah, it could be a turning point. But how many of you guys thought that the Blues were actually going to score on that, because the power play has been abysmal this year? So you can't really call it a turning point when you go into it thinking, yeah, this team's not going to score a goal anyway.
Okay. All right. I mean, they were getting off good shots, but not enough good shots. So in my mind, go ahead, Scott.
So I got a player question for you guys. So Torrey Krug gets hurt today. If Torrey Krug is out for an extensive amount of time, let's just say, I don't know what the injury is, what they're saying, lower body. But let's say he misses a good chunk of the season. With what you've seen this year to this point, do you start to look at that Torrey Krug signing, because he really hasn't been what the Blues fans thought they were getting to this point from Torrey Krug? Would you say that this signing, would you have questions about this signing if he doesn't really bounce back and have a strong end to his season for this year?
I'll say this. If Justin Falk wasn't having the year he was having this year, I think people could start questioning it, because we were saying the exact same things about Justin Falk last year when he was brought in and that massive contract was signed. And I cautioned people then, hey, sometimes it's going to take a little while for a guy to get used to it. I don't think Torrey Krug is playing as badly as Justin Falk was last year. And I also look at it and go, you're not hearing his name a whole lot, but sometimes that's not a bad thing. Yes, maybe he's not scoring the goals like he did in Boston. Yes, maybe he's not making, the plays that he did in Boston. But you're also not hearing his name when guys get beat, when goals are scored. And I think that gets a little bit lost in the conversation, because you're expecting, oh, this is Torrey Krug. If you don't hear his name, then something's going wrong. I think that's something that people have to look at as well. It's look where what he's doing. Are the top players that he's going against putting up points? If they're not, and yet you're still not hearing his name, that may be a good thing. I'm not going to question the contract right now, because I actually think the contract's much better than what Alex Pietrangelo was looking for, and he's not going to hold this team over a barrel. So once again, I know this is going to be hard to hear for 2 years in a row, but a brand new defenseman on this team, I'm stressing patience. And even if he is injured and out for a couple of weeks, I still think he gets the benefit of the doubt, and I really want to see what year 2 brings before I start to question whether he's worth keeping around.
Yeah, I would say that too. I think year 1 is a little too early to judge.
Except you were one of the ones, including myself, who thought Justin Falk should have been, outlawed to Seattle.
Yeah, hey, but you know what though? He's grown on me this year. I will admit that. But I'm talking
like a porn stash. Yep.
I mean, have you seen that thing? I mean, it's beautiful. You want to talk about another defenseman real quick? Colton Parayko has not been himself. Obviously,
he's not healthy. He's not healthy at all.
What is it? Is it an ankle injury, or what? Like, have they said? Because he just doesn't look right on the ice, man.
No, they haven't said, but there's definitely something wrong there.
If I were to hazard a guess, you're looking at probably maybe some sort of either groin or core issue that's bothering him, because his strides aren't as crisp as they've been in the past. His speed's not really there. You actually don't see him jumping up into the offensive plays very much as well either. So once again, that's another piece to the injury puzzle is, is he going out there and pushing himself through an injury because other guys are out? And if you do start to get a Scandella back, if Torrey Krug's not out for an extended period of time, if Nico Mikkola continues to show progression, does Craig Berube go over to Parayko and say, hey, look, dude, we're okay. Let's get you right, and let's have you ready for the playoffs? I don't know if that happens, but if Falk's playing well and Krug's playing well and healthy, and you've got Mikkola and Scandella back in the lineup and Vince Dunn is still with this team and playing well, I think at some point you have to look at it and go, yeah, you got to sit Parayko at least for a little bit of time.
Agreed.
So I got one more question about these two guys that we're talking about. So with Torrey Krug's kind of struggling and with Colton Parayko not looking right, how much of that is the pressure on Krug's part of being on a new team, which we talked about with Justin Falk last year? But not only is it the pressure of being on a new team, but basically you got brought in to be the replacement for the captain, the guy who everybody thought was going to stay in St. Louis for the rest of his career and have a statue and all of those things. So how much of that is weighing on Torrey Krug? And then is that something that's bothering Colton Parayko too? Because he was expected to step up and take so much of that slack from not having Petro out there. So is that like a domino effect that's affecting both of those guys, if not physically, mentally on the ice, just trying to compensate for the loss of Alex Pietrangelo?
I think it is. And I think Justin Falk felt that last year. He came in and he basically replaced a guy in Joel Edmondson that was a fan favorite. And it's not like he was replacing Alex Pietrangelo, but I believe it was Alex Ferrario that talked about this, that he was the only guy that, essentially was in the locker room on opening night when they raised the banner. He was the only guy that didn't go to the White House when the Blues were there to get presented with their jersey. So, yeah, I think some of that is definitely the mindset of a guy like Torrey Krug and Colton Parayko. Both guys looked at to be the next guy up. And I think because of that, it's also, once again, taking the pressure off of Justin Falk and allowing him to play the way he's playing it as well. And that's why, once again, I stress patience, because after you get through this year, I think you're going to finally be able to kind of settle in with where you're at on this team when it comes to Krug and Parayko, and they're going to be fine. Parayko, we've seen what he can do here in St. Louis. And I think that pressure of trying to be the next guy, because he has been anointed as the next guy in St. Louis by a lot of people. And I think he does have to just get past that. And maybe that is him going on the injured reserve for a little while to get healthy and coming back fresh. With Torrey Krug, it's about acclimating to the city of St. Louis, the style of Craig Berube and all of that. And I think by year 2, he'll be there. And Rooster chimes in real quick before we get out of here. What do you guys think about O'Reilly's performance as a captain so far?
Oh, I've liked O'Reilly. He's not netting in the goals. That's obvious, but he is putting up the assists. He is setting guys up. He's doing everything a captain should. And everybody knew he was captain material. At least I did when he first stepped in the door in St. Louis. He just had that aura about him. So I wasn't really worried about Ryan O'Reilly in terms of being a captain here, because I knew he'd do a hell of a job.
So Joe just basically told us he was Nostradamus, because he knew the second Ryan O'Reilly walked in the door that he was the next captain.
Well, not that he's captain material, I said I just knew that aura around him. Certain guys walk around with that. Like Yachty and Yachty with the Cardinals. I mean, every guy walks around with an aura. So I'm not going to take credit for O'Reilly being captain by any means, but it was the right choice.
I'm going to take credit for Justin Falk's resurgence for being patient, so I am going to take that one. Guys, great show tonight. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the changes that we're going to be implementing here. We're going to streamline it and get it a little bit better and a little bit better each and every time, and hopefully we'll get some graphics and stuff to use as well. But make sure you join us every night here on Crunch Time at 9 o'clock live for all of your sports needs here on ASTV Productions. For Joe, for Scott, I am Wags. Have a great rest of your Monday. And for those of you in the snow areas, stay safe out there.